So this morning I caught wind of Mossad agents talking about how the Gog-Magog war is here or almost here. Now, where I caught wind from it is not a good source, so I'm not going to quote it. But what I want to do today is discuss how the Gog-Magog war fits in World War III, as people will say today, or the final war that's going to bring Israel's Moshiach, or as the Christians say, the Antichrist. The Christians are on the wrong side of this particular discussion, by the way. And I have pointed that out over the past 5, 6, 7 years. So let's go ahead and get started with an article from Debcafile, and I have not used that particular source for a long time. But it's time to get started using them as a source again. Russia steps into Israel's shadow war in Iran. And so, for those of you who haven't noticed, apparently, I'm going to use that word, apparently, Israel has been for the last 3 days attacking Iranian targets in Syria and in Iran. So Russia steps into Israel's shadow war in Iran, and the Russians are going to say something about what Israel is doing, something that they have never said before. 2 new operations have revved up Israel's shadow war in Iran, striking at its nuclear ballistic program as well as smashing its corridor through Iraq for arming proxy Shiite militias in Syria. The first occurred on Saturday, January 28th, when an estimated 3 quadcopters with bomblets, see photo, there you see it right there, you know what it looks like, smashing into advanced weapons plant in Isfahan, demonstrating the detailed penetration Israel's intelligence has received for sabotaging Iran's developing nuclear and missile programs. These quadcopters have been used before. In June 2021, they were deployed to hit a centrifuge factory in Karaj outside Tehran, and once again in February 2022 to attack a drone manufacturing plant in Kermanshah. Since the maximum range for these 4-engine armed drones is no more than about 2 kilometers, the Mossad must obviously enlist local teams for arming and wielding them. The availability of local helpers for Mossad sabotage operations was hinted at in January 2018 by Yossi Cohen, then director of the spy agency, when he remarked, "We have eyes, ears, and more, if you will, inside Iran as well." And I'm going to add right here, I hope that these eyes and ears inside Iran are welcome with open arms when Israel opens up its kingdom. Shortly after Saudi media claimed that the attack was carried out by the U.S. and an allied force, Pentagon spokesman Brigadier General Patrick Ryder denied the U.S. military had played a part in the strikes, but declined to speculate further. Obviously, you see that the Saudis were actually running cover, metaphorically speaking, for the Israelis by saying it was the United States who did it. Shortly after the Isfahan strike, unidentified aircraft on Sunday night reportedly struck a convoy of 25 trucks carrying weapons and ammunition for pro-Iranian militias in Syria through Iraq, after it passed through the Syrian Abu Kabul borders, crossing controlled by the Hezbollah terrorist group. Syrian sources reported that 6 trucks burst into flames with casualties. Israeli pilots were reported to have sent up flares before the attack, giving the drivers a chance to escape. 2 operations clearly touched a sensitive nerve in Moscow, given its snowballing reliance on the Iranian military support for its war in Ukraine in the form of armed drones and ballistic missiles. On Monday, the Russian Foreign Ministry condemned the Isfahan attack as a provocation, warning that this act of terror. So now the Russians are labeling the Israelis as terrorists. You see where this is going, right? You have to establish some sort of the end justifies the means, casus belli, or whatever it is that you want to call it, before you attack a country, right? I mean, after all, they called the Ukrainians Nazis before they attacked the Ukrainians, right? So they called the Ukrainians Nazis, and now they're calling the Israelis terrorists. Look, I showed it to you. There it is, right there in front of you. This act of terror could have unpredictable consequences, adding an unusual statement. Russia's intelligence services are analyzing information about the attack to get a more complete picture of what happened. Moscow has never hitherto used the term terror in relation to Israel's long offensive against Iranian military targets. Of course, that is until now. It is taken to mean that the Russians and their intelligence resource sources have opened the door to intervening in Israel's shadow war against Iran whenever and wherever it sees fit. Go right ahead, Russia. Go right ahead. Because of the prophecy of Ezekiel 38 and 39. Go right ahead. Now, in Haaretz, now, yes, I know, Haaretz is a sort of a left-wing outfit. I'm not going to get into that today. But there is something written in here that the writer, Chemi Shalev, he makes some interesting statements in here. And if you're not careful, you could stumble over it and not even see it. Okay? So let's look at this particular article. FYI, Putin equals Gog. Crimea equals Magog. The apocalypse is here and the Messiah is coming. Now, I do not... My studying is not the same kind of studying that the Jews do today, but they are far, far closer to the truth. Or let me rephrase that. The Christians are as far away from the truth as you can get, and Israel is partially blind, but only partially. Okay? Not only Christian fans of Armageddon are buzzing, according to one rabbi, the Vilna Gaon himself predicted that when the Russians take Crimea, the steps of the Messiah will be heard. Now, there's really no biblical basis for that particular rabbi to say that, and so I just leave those statements be. Okay? I stick with the prophets in the Tanakh. The Allard Pearson Archaeological Museum in Amsterdam. Oh, what just happened here? They got rid of my... Let me see if I can pull it up again. Unbelievable. Well, I'll have to memorize it then. In this statement, he points out that this great war is to bring about what the Christians call the Antichrist, but what the Jews call the Messiah. And he is absolutely correct. All right? So, well, that just, I read the whole thing, and then it, but I don't subscribe to these things, because if I were to subscribe, and I'd have to pay money to all of these particular, and I halfway don't agree with some of what Haaretz stands for either. So anyway, let's move on to the next article. Now, here is the final goal. Dmitry Medvedev, the Eastern question will be solved with the collapse of Poland. It is now inevitable. So, in this particular article, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but maybe you should read it. That Dmitry Medvedev is justifying violence, claiming that Poland is not a real country. Now, he did the same thing before the invasion of Ukraine. And if you were to Google what Google and history itself defines as the beginning of World War II, it was Nazi Germany's invasion of Poland. And so, using the same logic, you could say that the invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022 was the beginning of World War III. The reason why I don't say that about the invasion of Crimea was because Russia pretended as if it didn't happen. The little green men phenomenon, soldiers with no national markings. But this time, clearly, their soldiers have national markings, and then they use propaganda to justify the invasion of Ukraine. And now they're using the same propaganda against Poland. I'll show you. Medvedev is sending a clear message to all Eastern European states. As you will see, there is even a message to Poland that the Eastern question will inevitably be solved with reference to its collapse in the past. What collapse in the past is he talking about? This is a revisitation of the division of Poland by the Nazis and the USSR. Russia's so-called acts of violence were the most legitimate thing that has ever happened in history, said Medvedev, quoting the Russian poet and sending a message to all Eastern European countries cooperating with NATO. He goes on to say, for centuries, the European West believed that there could be no other Europe apart from them. The sooner we recognize this, the better. Then we will have an explanation for everything. The true reason for the rapid successes and extraordinary expansion of Russia, which has left the planet stunned, becomes clear. One begins to understand that the so-called conquests and acts of violence are the most normal and lawful event in history. A powerful reunification is simply taking place. Also, it becomes clear why all these unnatural tendencies, forces, and institutions, which were at first unknown, were exterminated by Russia. Now, you got to understand, this is a translation from Greek, and this is a rough translation. This is the reason why you're seeing words here that perhaps don't belong, okay? One right after the other. For example, did Poland have to collapse? It is certainly not about the original Polish nation. Huh? What was that? What's he saying here? But for a fake culture and a fake nation which was imposed on her. So he's literally calling Poland a fake nation. So what you see here, what Dmitry Medvedev is saying is the Soviet Union is coming back, and they are taking land, and they are taking property, and they are taking people. So, we see Russia calling the Ukrainians Nazis. We see Russia calling the Israelis terrorists, and now we see Russia calling Poland not even a legitimate nation. Israel is in the mix, isn't it? This is a projection of their next attacks. Do I know which one is going to be first? No, I do not. I do not. I don't know if they're going to attack Poland next or if they're going to attack Israel next. But you see, the propaganda is very similar to how the propaganda occurred just before the invasion of Ukraine. Now, I think I've done enough of that. So, this brings us to the Gog-Magog war. All right. Now, why am I pointing to this statement, the eagles be gathered together? The eagles be gathered together. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to first look in, we're going to open this link in a tab. What happened? Alright, then we're going to open this link in a new tab and see what happens. Okay. I don't know what's going on. Oh, it's blocked. Well, that's how we're going to do it. Alright, never mind then. So we're going to go to, let's go to Matthew 24:28 first. Actually, I've kind of wished that I wanted to go to the other one first. Hold on. Eagles gathered. Come on now. All right. Luke 17:37. There's a reason why I wanted to use this one first. All right. 17:37. And they answered and they said unto him, Where? Where? Where what? Where Moshiach, or Master? And he said unto them, Where the body, there were the vultures be gathered together. All right? Why were they asking this question? 17:37? 37. So, this is the context, folks. All right. Verse 32, remember Lot's wife. The leaving, the exiting of the lands by all Israel, all Zionists, everyone who is a blood Israelite and everyone who is a Gentile Zionist. This applies to you. When this event occurs, remember Lot's wife. When you leave, do not look back. Everything, once you go, you do not return ever again. In those days, whoever shall try to save his life, you won't take the risk. I talked to a Filipino girl. Not talked to her on the phone, but I'm messaging. She said she wasn't going to take a plane. It was too risky. If you're not willing to take the risk, then you're going to lose it. And whosoever is willing to risk his life shall save it. You got to take that risk. I tell you, in that night there will be two men in one bed, couch, mat, sitting on a couch, and one will be taken and the other one left. Two women will be grinding together, one shall be taken and the other left. Two men will be in the field, and one shall be taken and the other left. And they answered and said unto him, Where? Well, the Christians say to heaven. That's what the Christians say. And he said unto him, Where the body? Where? Not the body of the church. Where the physical body is. That's where the vultures are going to be. So the vultures implicate dead bodies. What dead bodies? Let's go back a little bit then. All right. Let's go to Matthew 24, verse 28. For wheresoever the carcass is, the ruin, there will be the vultures be gathered together again. And I'm going to make sure that I've got this context correctly. I didn't miss anything. Yes. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines into the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. So the coming of the Son of Man is going to be where? And when? the vultures are gathered together. Where and when are they going to be gathered together? The answer is the Gog-Magog war. Now, let's see if verse 17, and you, son of man, thus says Adonai, I'm sorry. Some of you say Adonai. Yehovah, speak unto every feathered fowl, and to every beast of the field, assemble yourselves and come and gather yourselves on every side to my sacrifice that I sacrifice for you, even a great sacrifice upon the mountains of Israel. Now the mountains are the hill country. The hill country is northern Israel. That you may eat flesh and drink blood. Who is going to eat flesh and drink blood? The vultures. The feathered fowl vultures. It is at this particular juncture is when Yehoshua HaMoshiach is going to return. And you will eat the flesh of the mighty, and drink the blood of the princes, of the captains of the earth, of rams, of lambs, of goats, of bullocks, and all of them fatlings of Bashan. And Bashan is in and on the other side of the Golan Heights. So they're going to be invading from the Golan Heights. And you shall eat fat and be full and drink blood until you are drunken of my sacrifice that I have sacrificed for you. Thus shall you be filled at my table with horses and chariots and mighty men and with all men of war, says Adonai Yehovah. Well, I have an uncle. I don't know if he still makes this claim or not. But if you're listening out there, you need to pay attention. If you think this is only in reference to the after the 1,000-year rule, you are sadly mistaken. Because there are a few things that are written here. He says, I will show my glory to the Gentiles. And all the Gentiles will see my judgment that I have executed and my hand that I have laid upon them. And so the house of Israel shall know Yehovah, Elohim, beginning with this day. That's the same day that the Ruach Kodesh is going to be poured out upon all Israel, as written in Joel 2, in the last 3 to 4 verses. This is the day of Jehovah's wrath, when it begins. And on that day, he's going to pour out his Ruach Kodesh upon all Israel. It says so as we continue. This is the day that they, Israel, are going to know him. And it is also the day that the Gentiles are going to know him. From that day, beginning with that day and onward. You see that? Onward. There can be no mistake what this means. And the Gentiles shall know that the house of Israel went into captivity for their iniquity, because they trespassed against me. Therefore I concealed my face from them, and gave them into the hand of their enemies. And then they fell by the sword, according to their uncleanness and according to their transgressions have I done unto them, and I hid my face from them. Now, this is what Adonai, Jehovah says. I will bring back the captivity of Jacob. So this is going to trigger the bringing back of all Israel, not just some of them. You see, up until this point in time, after the dispersion of the lost 10 tribes, the lost 10 tribes became Gentiles. I have showed this to you in many videos, where a bill of divorcement was written and the name Israel was taken away from the 10 tribes, the northern tribes. And only the Jews, which amounted to Yehuda, Benjamin, and some of Levi, were called Israel. But now he's going to bring back all the captivity of Jacob and have mercy upon the whole house of Israel, and will be jealous for my Shem Kodesh. In the after part, oh yes, they will carry, they've borne their shame, and all the trespasses where have they trespassed against me. When they, in the old days, ancient Israel, dwelt safely in their land, and none made them afraid. I have brought them back again. They have returned from the Gentiles, and have gathered them out of their land of their enemies. And I am sanctified in them in the sight of many Gentiles, and they shall know Jehovah Elohim, which caused them to be led into captivity among the Gentiles. But I have gathered them back to their own land, and have left none of them there any more. Neither will I hide my face any more from them, for I have poured out my Ruach upon the whole house of Israel, says Adonai Jehovah. So anything that you read in Ezekiel 38 that you read differently than this, it's because you read it wrong. You read it wrong. So now we go to 38. And please do not forget where the vultures are gathered together. That is where the dead bodies are going to be. That is also where the Moshiach is going to come down to save Israel from this invasion. Now, who are they going to bring with them? Son of man, set your face against Gog, the land of Magog, Rosh. Rus means Rosh, which means chief. The chief of nations, the chief of the Gentiles. Captain of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against them. Jehovah, Adonai Jehovah says, Gog, Rosh, prince of Meshech and Tubal, return. Return, come on back. And put hooks in your jaws. I will bring you forth, and all of your army, and I've mentioned to you again, horses, are pullers of wagons, whether they are four-footed beasts, and they are also warbirds. All of them clothed with all sorts of armor, a great company with bucklers and shields, and all of them handling sidearms. Where did I? Tools, axes of steel. Tools of steel. See, that's not just swords, but it can be other weapons of steel, of iron. You see? But possibly swords as implements ready for hand-to-hand combat. Alright? Persia, Iran. Kush. Kush and Put. You see what Russia's doing now, right? You think that, folks, if you think that the West can stop Russia in Ukraine, you have no idea. What's about to happen next. Now, wait a minute. There's no black folks in the Russian army. Or are they? Former rebels, this is African former rebels recruited as mercenaries by the Kremlin-linked Wagner Group have been abandoned in Ukraine, a report says. Well, they clearly have been recruiting Kushites into the Wagner Group against Ukraine. What's to stop them from doing it in Israel? You can obviously see that war is about to break out between Israel and Iran, Persia. After all, Israel is threatening the military supply of Russia by attacking that supply in Iran for the last 3 days. And now Russia is calling Israel a terrorist organization. Now, I want to remind you something, folks. Poland is a member of NATO. Ukraine is not a member of NATO. Israel is not a member of NATO. Who do you think that Russia might attack first? Poland or Israel? I will let you draw your own conclusions. I don't claim to know the answer. I'm asking you to use logic and common sense. Keep your eyes open, folks. You have no idea what kind of... The Wagner Group has been recruiting people from all sorts of countries. You see? Former rebels of the Central African Republic who the Wagner Group recruited to fight in Ukraine have been left without money, food, or ammunition. And so the same thing will happen in Israel. Let's continue. Okay. Persia, Cush, Put, Libya, and all of them were shielded Helmer. Gomer and his bands, the house of Togarmah of the north part, and all of his bands, and many people with you. I have, folks, the possibilities are endless, folks. I have done videos identifying Gog, Magog, the Togarmah war of judgment upon the Gentiles. The beast is Euro-Christian Roman. Here's a proof of the table of nations. And Israel's Moshiach will fight against the church, and here's proof. So you might want to check out those 3 videos for more information, okay? Be prepared. All your great company that are assembled, and be a guard unto them. After many days is your visitation. In the latter years you shall come into the land that is taken back. Did Israel take back the land? Yes. Did they take back Jerusalem? Yes. Although there are still Christian and Muslim squatters in the land, they did take it back by the sword, and is gathered partly out of many people against the hill country of Israel. The hill country is not Jerusalem. That's northern Israel. They're going to come into northern Israel, which was continually a desolate ruin, but is now taken away from the Gentiles. Northern Israel is taken away from the Gentiles. And those that are living there have been dwelling safely. All right? You will ascend and come like a storm. To ravage the land. To pillage. Your army, the many people with you. Adonai, Jehovah says, it shall come to pass that at the same time shall things come into your mind. You will think an adversarial thought. You will become Israel's adversary in the most obscene way. And you will say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages, or open hamlets. The open region, not unwalled villages. The open region is not Jerusalem. It's not Tel Aviv. It's northern Israel, near the Golan Heights. I will go to them that are quiet and dwell safely, dwelling without walls, having neither bars nor gates. Well, hamlets, just Google hamlets, and you'll see what he's talking about. To take a spoil, to take a prey, to turn your hand upon the waste places. Why? If you've been paying attention. There is so much oil in northern Israel. And Israel has in its possession, as promised by Jacob and Moshe themselves, would be in those lands. Russia knows this and wants it. They think that they are the great empire. They want to bring the Soviet Union back. They are justifying their violence against whomever they want to do it to. And now they're calling the Israelis terrorists. I proved it to you. The inhabited and the people that are gathered out of the Gentiles. They got cattle and goods, and they dwell in the midst of the land. Sheba and Dedan, that is reference to Saudi Arabia. Because there are several Shebas. But the Sheba and Dedan is in reference to Saudi Arabia. And the merchants of Tarshish, the far, far western countries, with all their young lions, young, strong nations, thereof shall say unto you, are you come to take a spoil? Are you guided your company to take a prey? Well, that's what they did with Ukraine. They said the same thing. You see? Silver and gold to take away cattle, and goods to take a great spoil? Son of man, prophesy and say unto Gog. Adonai Jehovah says, in that day when my people of Israel, still only 2.5 tribes, are dwelling safely, you will know it, and you will come out of your place, out of the north parts, you and many people with you, riding upon Sus, a great company, a mighty army, and you shall come up against my people of Israel as a cloud to cover the land, and it shall be in the last days, in the after part. Right? Let's go to Yoel 2. You need to keep that term, the after part, in your mind. It is absolutely critical. In the after part, what after part? Joel 2, verse 28. And in the after part, I will pour out my spirit upon flesh. Doesn't say all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. In the after part, in the after part. You see that? So this is the same event. After part. After part. All right? And also upon the servants and upon the handmaids. On that day will I pour out my Ruach. There will be portents in the sky and in the earth, blood and fire and tomorrow of smoke. Tomorrow of smoke is palm-like columns, or today we call them mushroom clouds. Why? The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood, facing the great and terrible day of Jehovah's wrath. And it shall come to pass, whosoever shall proclaim the Shem Jehovah shall be delivered to Mount Zion. Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as Jehovah has said. Now we continue. We have context. In the latter days, In the after part will I bring you against my land, and the Gentiles may know me, when I am sanctified in you, O Gog, before their eyes. Jehovah, or Adonai Jehovah, says, I spoke in old times through my servants, the prophets of Israel, which prophesied in that day, and that year, that I would bring you against them. So of course Israel, the Jews know about this. And it shall come to pass in that same time, when Gog shall come up against the land of Israel, Adonai Jehovah, says he, my fury shall come up in my face, for in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath have I spoken. In that day there shall be a great shaking in the land of Israel, so that the fishes of the sea and the fowl of the sky and the beasts of the field and all the creeping things that creep upon the earth and all the men that are upon the face of the earth shall shake at my presence, and the mountains shall be thrown down, and the steep places shall fall, and every wall shall fall to the ground. So that all the walls in Jerusalem are going to fall to the ground too. Don't get your weird ideas that it's going to be a time when there is no walls in Israel. You failed to use Strong's Concordance. And I will call for a sword against him through all of my mountains, says Adonai Jehovah, and every man's sword shall be against his brother. That begins World War III. Well, I just said Ukraine. Well, I didn't say Ukraine began World War III or the... I'm saying that history says that World War II began when Russia invaded Poland, and using their logic that when Russia invaded Ukraine, that's World War III. Can you see what's going on here? We are given advance notice of what is about to happen. How is this difficult to understand? I will judge him with pestilence and with blood. And I will rain upon him and his bands and upon his many people that are with him an overflowing rain, great hailstones, fire, and brimstone. And this I will magnify myself and sanctify myself, and will be known in the eyes of all the Gentiles, that they may know Jehovah. Now I want to show you something. We go back to Ezekiel 39. Therefore, Son of man, prophesy against Gog, and thus says Adonai Jehovah, I am against you, Gog, Rosh, prince of Meshech and Tubal. Does not say, and I will turn you back and leave but the sixth part of you. It does not say that. It says, you will return, you will be led on. Shah means to be led on. And you will climb from the north parts, and you will bring you to the mountains of Israel. I will strike the bow out of your left hand, and I will cause your arrows to fall out of your right hand, which means there will suddenly be equipment failure. And you will fall upon the mountains of Israel and all your bands and the people that are with you. I will bring upon you ravenous birds of every sort. When and where is Moshiach coming? In the Ezekiel 38-39 war. And to the beasts of the field to be devoured, you shall fall in the open field, for I have spoken, it says Adonai Jehovah. And a fire will be set on Magog and among them that dwell carelessly in the coastlands, and that is in reference to Rome, the coastlands of the Mediterranean Sea. This is in reference to nuclear war. Nuclear bombs dropping on Russia and on Europe. Will nuclear bombs fall on the United States? I suspect so. Now do you see, folks? Now do you understand? So, prepare. They just called for the first time. They called Israel terrorists. They called the Ukrainians Nazis. They called Israel terrorists. We just read that Dmitry Medvedev is telegraphing the next move on Poland. And Poland is a NATO country. Israel is not. So therefore, just like Ukraine, NATO does not have to defend Israel. But Israel does not need NATO. In fact, NATO and Europe have been keeping Israel down. And I suspect that after the Gog-Magog war, when Yehoshua sits on his throne of glory, that is when the remaining groups of Gentiles will come up against Jerusalem. That's for another time and for another video. Prepare yourselves. You should be able to see this coming a mile away.